Yeah, so just to have it on record, forgot to record. So yes, today we are going to talk about macroeconomics. Um, so so far we've been discussing microeconomics as I was just explaining. Micro is when the individual, like firm or person or household, make decisions in the market and how their individual decisions interact with one another. But macroeconomics is the study of economy as a whole. So it's called to explain economic changes that affects many households and markets at once. So macroeconomics answers questions like why is average income high in some countries and low in other countries? Why do prices rise rapidly in some time periods while they are more stable in others? And why do production and employment expand in some years and contract in others? So answering questions about economies of the world, economies of certain countries, and all that. So it's more of an economy as a whole, more holistic view rather than the individualistic view of micro. So the economy's income and expenditure. When judging whether the economy is doing well or poorly, it is natural to look at the total income that everyone in the economy is earning. So when we are judging the economy as a whole, so we naturally look into the income that everybody in the economy is earning. So it's like we want to sort of analyze it as a whole and understand what's exactly going on. Okay. So for economy as a whole, income must equal expenditure because every transaction has a buyer and a seller. So every dollar of spending by some buyer is a dollar of income for some seller. So when you look at it that way, your income and expenditure in the economy as a whole should be the same because whenever you have a buyer, you have a seller. So whenever you have an expense, you have an income for somebody else. So when somebody incurs an expense, somebody will make some profit out of it. So it's just it's natural to look at it that way. And so in this case, we have something called gross domestic product, or GDP, which you have probably heard a lot in different economic discussions. And what it is actually a measure of income and expenditures of an economy. So it is the total market value of all final goods and services produced within a country in a given period of time. So the total market value of all final goods and services produced within a country, we call it GDP. So whenever we say like GDP of this country is this much and that country is that much, what we basically mean is the total number of market value of goods and services that are produced within a country within that certain period of time. The quality of income and expenditures can be illustrated with the circular flow diagram, which you can see here. So we have the markets for factors of production, households sell, firms buy, then factors of production, they sell it to the firms, produce and sell goods and services, hire and use factors of production. Yes, mostly GDPs are, they do it for a year. It's an annual calculation they do. And then goods and services sold to markets for goods and services, firms and households sells and buy, then goods and services bought, then households buy and consumers goods and services own and sell factors of production and labor and land and capital. So the first one is flow of inputs and outputs, and the second one is flow of dollars, as you can see. So markets make revenue, the revenue comes to the firm, firms pay wages, rent, and profit, and they put it in the market, it becomes income, and then the households will get it, and they spend it. So it's like a flow that goes and comes back. Works both ways. So as you can probably see, the inputs and outputs go the opposite way of the dollars, because those are used to create dollars. Okay, so measurement of the GDP. GDP, as we said, is the market value of all final goods and services produced within a country in a given period of time. So GDP is the market value. So output is valued at market prices of all final. It's records only the value of final goods, not intermediate goods. The value of counted only once. So we are only looking at the final goods, those that are not the intermediate goods that are not final. And goods and services, it includes both tangible goods like food, clothing, cars, and intangible services like haircuts, house cleaning, and doctor visits, all these. So services also. And then produced. It includes goods and services currently produced, not transactions involving goods produced in the past. So we don't, in GDP, we only deal with those produced just right now, not those in the past. And then within a country, it measures the value of production within a geographic confines of a country. So only those productions in your country. So in a given period of time, it measures the value of production that takes place within a specific interval of time, usually a year or a quarter, which is 3 months. So to answer your question, Mr. Amazai, yes, mostly it's a year, but sometimes they do GDP quarterly, which is 1/4 of a year, which is 3 months. GDP includes all items produced in the economy and sold legally in the market. So only legal products, not the illegal products. Those that are produced and in the economy and are sold legally in the economy, in the market. What is not counted in GDP? GDP excludes most items that are produced and consumed at home and that never enter the marketplace. So there are sometimes there are products produced at homes and they never enter the market, so they don't count it. And it includes items produced and sold illicitly, such as illegal drugs. So we don't go for illegal items, only for products that are produced legally and sold at the market, we only count them. So GDP, which we calculated, represented with Y, is the sum of the following. So consumption plus investment plus the government purchases plus the net exports equals our GDP. So GDP equals consumption, investment, government expenses, net income, net export, sorry. So this is how we calculate our GDP. So Y equals consumption plus investment plus government purchases plus net exports. So what is consumption? The spending by a household on goods and services with the exception of purchase of new housing. So when the household spends on goods and services except when they purchase a new house. Then investment, the spending on capital equipment, inventories and structure, including new housing. So investment, so buying a new house would be an investment, not a consumption. So spending on capital, inventory, the structures, and new housing. Government purchases, spending on goods and services by a local, state, or federal government, does not include transfer payments because They are not made in exchange for currently produced goods and services. And net exports minus imports would be net exports. So let's say when your country exports this much, let's say $5 billion, and they import, let's say, 1, so 4 minus 1, it will be 3, which is your net exports. Exports, yes. So as you can see here, the table 1 GDP and its components. As you can see, gross domestic product total in $1 billion. They have the consumption, they have the investment, they have the government purchases, and net exports. So net exports in this case is minus, which negative, which means that their exports are less than their imports. So the number of their exports is lower than the number of their imports. So when they do the calculation, they come up with a negative number. And then they divide it per person, so they get the per person and person of total also they'll get. Okay, any questions so far? Any comments or questions? Okay, let's go to the next slide then. So as you can see, GDP and its components. So we have government purchases, which is 18%, net exports, negative 3%, consumption 69%, investment is 16%. That was for 2001. Real versus nominal GDP. Nominal GDP values the production of goods and services at the current prices, but real, it will consider that as constant prices. So when we calculate them at the current prices, it's nominal, but when we put it at the constant prices, it will be real. An accurate view of economy requires adjustment of nominal to real by using the GDP deflator. So by using GDP deflator, we change the nominal into the real. So let's say in 2001, price of hot dogs was $1 quantity, and then price of hamburgers. So as you can see, you have the prices and quantities we can calculate. So to calculate the nominal, we multiply the price by the number of hot dogs sold plus the price of hamburgers, the number sold. So we get that pretty simple. But for real, as you can see, nominal, as we discussed here, Mr. Ahmadzai, nominal is when we calculate with the current prices, but real is with their constant prices. So to give you an example here, we have the prices for different years and their quantities. So this is how we calculate the nominal, and this is how we calculate the real. So as you can see, the nominal and real for the first one is the same, but for the second one is different. For this one is 600, for the real is 350. because we are using the constant prices. As you can see, we use the same price for every year. But for nominal, we use different prices because they change. So for the 2002 is $2, and for hot dog and $3 for hamburger, and then next year it's going to be $3 per hot dog and $4 per hamburger. But for real, we actually do it for same price because we use a constant price. So the GDP deflator is a measure of the price level calculated as a ratio of nominal GDP to real GDP times 100. So it tells us the rising nominal GDP that is attributable to a rise in prices rather than a rise in quantities. So the reason we say real and we use constant prices is because we believe when the quantity are the same and the prices are changed, it's just a price change, but the quantity is pretty much the same. So we want to understand what is the rise in the prices so that we understand what's going on, especially like regarding inflation. So what happens is we calculate the nominal and then get the ratio over the real and times 100, gives us a ratio, and it tells us the rise in nominal, which is just the increase in prices. So nominal GDP divided by real times 100 gives us a GDP deflator. And what it does is converting nominal GDP to real GDP. Nominal GDP is converted to real GDP as follows. So real GDPs for this number is, let's say for 2001, is nominal GDP divided by GDP deflator times 100. So we said that the GDP deflator is the nominal divided by the real times 100. So if we divide nominal by the GDP deflator times 100, we get the real GDP. So these are some calculations. For 2001, the GDP deflator is it's the same. For the 2002, as you can see, is 171. For 2003, GDP deflator, which is the division of the nominal by real times 100, is 240. So as you can see, real GDP in the United States, the real GDP is actually increasing over the years, and that's because the prices are increasing. So the higher the real GDP goes, there's more issues that we are supposed to be concerned about. GDP and economical well-being. So GDP is the best single measure of economic well-being of a society. So mostly what you see the IMF or United Nations refer to when they are trying to come up with some understanding of different countries' well-being of their society, they actually look at their GDPs. Those countries with higher GDP are those which are considered to have a better well-being for their society. And especially GDP per person tells us that economic income and expenditure of the average person are in the economy. Okay, so higher GDP per person indicates a higher standard of living. That's pretty basic understanding of these calculations. So the higher the GDP per capita or per person shows a higher standard of living. And GDP, of course, is not a perfect measure of happiness or quality of life, however. So standard of living doesn't guarantee happiness or quality of life, but for sure it represents the standard of living. So the higher the GDP is, the higher is the standard of living, which is probably expenditure and all that, but it doesn't guarantee the happiness and quality of life. Okay. Some things that contribute to well-being are not including GDP, like value of leisure, value of clean environment, value of almost all activities that take place outside of the market. So there's value of time parents spend with their children and value of volunteer work. So these are not represented in GDP, like the volunteer work that doesn't bring in any income or salary or expense. It's basically not represented in the GDP calculation. And the reason being, as we discussed, GDP only takes care of those things that reflect in the market. So if it's not reflected in the market, so it definitely is not going to be shown or represented in the GDP calculation. Okay. Any questions so far? Any comments or questions? Any ideas, any comments, any questions? Okay, so let's go to the next slide. So as you can see here, these are some charts that are actually done regarding the GDP. So comparing the GDP and life expectancy, you can get some ideas. So these are done in 1999. As you can see in U.S., the GDP, the real GDP per person is pretty high, and the life expectancy was 77 years, and then adult literacy was 99%. Then Japan, you see the GDP and the life expectancy, and then the adult literacy. So you see all these different countries with different GDPs, different life expectancy. As you can see, Japan has a very high life expectancy, and their GDP is the second highest. But so what it shows really is that it doesn't guarantee that when GDP. Mr. Nazari, do you have a question for us?
No, I don't have any question.
Oh, sure, no worries. So if you don't mind, I'm going to mute your microphone. Okay. Beautiful. So yeah, so as you can see, the GDP doesn't guarantee having a higher life expectancy, but it increases the possibility. As you can see, like U.S., even though they have a very high GDP, they don't have the highest life expectancy, but they are among the highest. Like U.S., Japan, and Germany, they have the highest life expectancy than the rest. So summary, because every transaction has a buyer and a seller, the total expenditure in the economy must equal the total income in the economy. So it's pretty common sense, because there's always a buyer and a seller to a transaction. So the total expenditure should equal the total income. Then gross domestic product measures an economy's total expenditures on newly produced goods and services and the total income earned from the production of these goods and services. So the GDP basically measures economy's total expenditures on newly goods and services that are produced, and the total income earned from the production of these goods. So you're not talking about those in the past, you're talking about the newly, like in that certain quarter or year that we are calculating it. GDP is the market value of all final goods and services produced within a country in a given period of time. GDP is divided among 4 components of expenditure, which is consumption, investment, government purchases, and net exports. So nominal GDP uses current prices to value the economy production. Real GDP uses constant or base year prices to value the economy's production of goods and services. And then the GDP deflator, as we discussed, is calculated from the ratio of nominal to real GDP, measures the level of prices in the economy. And GDP is a good measure of economic well-being because people prefer higher to lower incomes. And it is not a perfect measure of well-being because some things such as leisure time and clean environment aren't measured in GDP. Okay, so any questions on this chapter, on this topic, on GDP and basically macroeconomics versus microeconomics? Does everybody understand the difference between macro and microeconomics? Are there any questions or comments? Yeah, as we discussed, the GDP is calculated here. So GDP equals the consumption plus investment plus government purchases plus net exports. And net exports is actually the exports minus imports, which gives us the net exports. Okay, any other question? Consumption is actually what people consume, basically what they, as we see here, is the spending of goods and services by the household, minus the new housing. New housing is actually investment. So the capital, equipment, inventory, the structures, and new housing is investment. Then the government purchases is spending on goods and services by local or federal governments, and net exports is exports minus imports. Sure, no worries. Okay, so are there any other questions or comments? Okay, so it seems there's no questions, so let's go to the next chapter, which is macroeconomics of open economics. So open economics, macroeconomics, basic concepts. Open and closed economics. So we do have open and closed economics. So what do we mean by that? A closed economy is the one that does not interact with other economies in the world. There are no exports, no imports, and no capital flows. So basically closed economies, they close the doors. They don't want to interact with the economies in the world. But open economies, we don't have closed economies in the world. It's just different countries, they choose different methods of economics. So open economy is the one that interacts freely with other economies of the world. So an open economy interacts with other countries in two ways. It buys and sells goods and services in world product markets. It buys and sells capital assets in world financial markets. Okay, so some countries like U.S., like a lot of European countries, they have opened their economies, like people can come and invest, and they go invest, they buy and sell. But certain countries, they try to, like some African countries, some Middle Eastern countries, they don't like to interact that much with like the world, so they have closed economics. So an open economy, the United States is a very large and open economy. It imports and exports huge quantities of goods and services. But over the past 4 decades, international trade and finance have become increasingly important. So exports are goods and services that are produced domestically and sold abroad. So basically, yes, actually, there is a hybrid version of it that they use certain level of openness and certain level of closedness. We call it hybrid economies, and we will also touch on that a bit later. So by exports, those are goods and services that are produced inside the country, and then they're sold in the abroad market. And imports are goods and services that are produced abroad and sold domestically. So net exports are the value of a nation's exports minus the value of imports. So as we discussed that for GDP, we needed net exports. So with the deduction of the exports minus the imports will give us the net exports. And net exports are also called the trade balance. So now here comes some interesting terms that you hear probably a lot in economic discussions. We have a trade deficit. Trade deficit is a situation in which net exports are negative. It means your imports are higher than your exports. So basic economies are, yes, Iran has a closed economics. That's absolutely true. It's a very good example of a closed economics. So trade deficit is a situation in which net exports are negative, so your imports are higher than your exports, and your trade surplus is a situation in which the exports are higher than the imports, which is a great situation to be at. And the balance trade refers to the one that net exports and zero, which means your exports and imports are the same. So balance and surplus are actually considered very good, and deficit is not something really desirable. So factors that affect net exports. So the taste of consumers for domestic and foreign goods. Sometimes the consumers will decide and give direction to come. For those countries that they have open economies, that not everything is regulated, like exports and imports are free, then the taste of the consumers are the main directors of the level of exports or imports. Because if they like domestic products, they'll use the domestic products and you will have less of imports. But if, like, the price of goods at home and abroad, so there are certain prices and goods that are different when you buy it at home rather than when you buy it abroad. So exchange rate at which people can use domestic currency to buy foreign currency. And also exchange rate is important. If your exchange rate is pretty high, that sort of discourages consumers to buy foreign goods because it's very expensive to exchange, and when the price is converted, it's pretty high. So factors that affect net exports are the incomes of consumers at home and abroad, the cost of transporting goods from country to country, and the policies of government toward international trade. So as you can see here, for the U.S., the level of exports and imports are going pretty much the same direction, but the exports has reduced from the era of 2000 onward. So from 2000 onward, the level of imports have been increasingly added, and because of the fact that China has been a major place for outsourcing, a lot of imports are happening from China, and a lot of exports are being terminated and like not doing anymore or being discontinued. So net capital outflow is actually net capital outflow refers to the purchase of foreign assets by domestic residents minus the purchase of domestic assets by foreigners. So net capital flow refers to basically buying assets. So basically, a U.S. resident buys a stock in the Toyota Corporation, and a Mexican buys a stock in the Ford Motor Corporation. These are net capital outflow. Means a foreigner buys assets inside your country. Transportation actually is one of the sources of income, you know. So transportation basically will be part of the GDP. I mean, it depends. If the transportation is happening inside the country, it's actually adding to the GDP. But if you're asking regarding the transportation of the goods and prices, products, that when you want to export, if you have efficient transportation, that probably enhances your exports and also imports. So it depends how you look at transportation. So it's really difficult to say what is, I mean, the impact of transportation on GDP. It depends on the fact that what aspect of transportation are you looking at. Yeah, for the question of Mr. Elias for China's graph, it's most probably a very high level of exports. They do have a very high level of imports, like a lot of contracts they have with the U.S. is they will buy a lot of things from U.S. also. So they do have imports from U.S., but like steel and a lot of things, but their exports are pretty high. They do have surplus in their economy for sure. So when a U.S. resident buys a stock in Telemex, the Mexican phone company, the purchases raises the U.S. net capital outflow. So basically, that U.S. resident is outflowing the cash from the U.S. into some other markets. When a Japanese resident buys a bond issued by the U.S. government, it reduces the net capital outflow in the U.S. Yeah, so basically the idea is to reduce the capital outflow, because when you have capital outflow, the money is leaving your country and going to different foreign markets. So countries are trying to encourage their residents to spend the money inside the market, and they discourage them from taking the money out. So, and a lot of countries which have closed economy, they actually impose rules to stop their people to take money out. Like countries like Malaysia, Iran, and a lot of other countries, they don't let their residents to take certain money out. So they devise a rule so that people won't be able to take the money out. Variables that influence net capital outflow. So the real interest rates being paid on foreign assets. So sometimes if the interest rate that are paid on the foreign asset is high, It encourages foreigners to sort of deposit and or invest money, so that sort of decreases, or when it's the reverse, it sort of increases the net capital outflow. The real interest rates being paid on domestic assets, the perceived economic and political risk of holding assets abroad. Yes, that's actually the way they conceive it, Mr. Elias. The people, like the country, because it hurts your GDP, so you rather that your currency and your asset will stay in your country, so you try to have the lesser net capital outflow. But the approaches of different countries to that is different. As I said, certain countries, they impose rules that stop you from taking money. But certain countries is just they're using different tools to do that. The perceived economic and political risk. So stability of the country is also very important. Like certain countries that they don't have a stable political situation, a lot of capital outflow happens. People leave their assets out of the country because it's not as stable. The open economy actually works in the sense that when you have an open economy, when you have a lot of exports rather than imports, your economy is inviting enough for foreigners to come and invest in your country. So you don't have necessarily capital outflow, but you have inflow because a lot of people are coming and investing from overseas in your country because you have a great economy, you have a very booming industry, so they rather come and invest in your economy. So the capital outflow, though, happens when your people, your residents, take the money out and go invest somewhere else because they don't find the economy promising enough. So having an open economy is actually helping you to have a great promising economy that invites people over to invest. Yes, I mean, it actually happens that way. So you don't basically try to increase their outflow, but you try to increase your inflow. But that inflow is it happens at the cost of countries having outflow. But it's not that you try to make them have outflow, but because you have a promising economy, it's so inviting for other countries to come and invest. But if your economy is not stable and it's not inviting, your own residents will take the money and invest in somewhere else that brings them better interest, better stability, and also ownership. So that's when you will have a net capital outflow. So net exports and net capital outflow are closely linked, as you see. So when you have high level of exports, means a lot of countries also buying stuff from you, so you have a lot of capital inflow. It's like they're closely related. For an economy as a whole, net exports and net capital outflow must balance each other. Means that your capital outflow should be equal to your net exports so that they cancel each other out at least. So this holds true because every transaction that affects one side must also affect the other side. So as you see, when you have exports, your net exports means your imports, your exports minus imports of U.S. funding goes back to U.S. contractor in U.S. Yeah. I see. So as you see, every transaction that happens, there is one side of this equation. So idealistically, they should be equal to each other. So net exports is a component of GDP, as you remember. We said the GDP was consumption plus investment plus government spending plus net exports. So basically, national savings is the income of the nation that is left after paying for current consumption and government purchases. So national saving, as you can see here, equals the income plus the net exports. So the GDP minus consumption minus government spending gives you the national savings of the nation. So as you can see, these are different calculations. These are basic calculations that gives us a very good idea that where our country or economy stands. Or even when you want to invest in an economy of a country, making some basic calculations, and all these numbers are available by major financial institutions like IMF or United Nations. They give you all these numbers, and you can just do some basic calculations, and it gives you some idea whether a certain country is a good place to invest or not. So these are really helpful when it comes to export or import to or from a certain country. So national savings equals the investment plus net exports, or domestic investment and net capital outflow is actually net savings. And what happens here, we just explained that net exports and net capital outflow they should be the same. So that's why we did just interchangeably used it. So a net capital outflow plus investment, or investment plus net exports equals saving, or investment plus net capital outflow. They're the same. So as you can see in this chart, the domestic investment, we see the national savings and domestic investment as percentage of GDP. So as you can see here, we have the domestic investment and national savings. So the same concept goes after the exports after 2000 went down in the U.S. You see the national savings is also going down. Okay. And as you see here, the net capital outflow also is playing here. So international transactions are influenced by international prices. The two most important international prices are the nominal exchange rate and the real exchange rate. So just to okay. So international prices are very important. Yeah, nominal and real. Basically, we'll discuss that later, but what happens is, what is the nominal and real? Just an exercise here. Yeah. So nominal exchange rate and real exchange rate, I'm going to explain it in the next slide. But what I just want to pinpoint here is the fact that international transactions, they are very much influenced by international prices. So let's say if the prices go down, the international transactions would be probably encouraged, and a lot of people will do them. So the same token, if they go up, so as you can see, international transactions, they require exchange of foreign currencies. Like let's say if you want to buy some stuff from a different country, you probably have to exchange money, and that is why international prices are very important. So now let's go for nominal and real exchange rate. So nominal exchange rate is the rate at which a person can trade the currency of one country for the currency of another. Okay, so to answer your question, Mr. Riasi, the control for the prices is actually, if you remember our previous topics on demand and supply, it actually helps you understand how it works. Basically what happens, especially in free economies, is basically demand and supply. So when the demand goes high, so the prices actually go higher also. And also when the supply goes high, the prices go down, if you remember that. So that actually works in international or world economy as well. So when certain products, like computer products, are just exclusive to certain countries in the world, they have the say to set the price at whatever level that they like. So so what happens is whatever price they say is going to be the final price. But when there are so many different countries producing a certain product, then the price will go down. So by playing around the demand and supply, that's how they will change or control the prices. I hope that answered your question, Mr. Riasi. So nominal exchange rate, as we said, is the rate at which a person can trade a currency from one country to another country. And the nominal is expressed in two ways: in units of foreign currency per US dollar, and in units of US dollar per 1 unit of foreign currency. So it's actually the nominal exchange rate that we just discussed. Assume the exchange rate between the Japanese yen and US dollar is 80 yen to $1. So 1 US dollar trades for 80 yen, or 1 yen trades for 1/80th, which is 0.0125 of a dollar. So that's how we sort of say or communicate it. Then we do have some certain things called appreciation and depreciation. So appreciation refers to the fact that there is an increase in the value of currency as measured by the amount of foreign currency. So when there is an increase to the value of a foreign currency compared to the other currency, we say we have an appreciation. And then the depreciation happens when there is a decrease in the value of a currency as measured by the amount of a foreign currency we can buy. So let's say when the value of US dollar goes high compared to yen, we say we have an appreciation. But when the value of when the value of the US dollar compared to yen goes down, we have depreciation for US dollar, but we have appreciation for yen in that sense. Okay? Any questions so far? Okay, so in another sense, if a dollar buys more foreign currency, there is an appreciation of the dollar. But if it buys less, there is a depreciation of the dollar. So let's say today you pay $1, you get this much foreign currency. If tomorrow you give $1 and you get more of the same foreign currency, you have an appreciation. Or if you get less, you have a depreciation. That is also another way of looking at it. And now what is the real exchange rate? The real exchange rate is the rate at which a person can trade the goods and services of one country for another. So the real is more of a goods and services, not the foreign currency. So the real exchange rate compares the price of domestic goods and prices in domestic countries. So in case of German beer, is twice as expensive as American beer. The real exchange rate is 1/2 case of German beers per case of American beer. So we have this fact called the nominal exchange rate, which is just the currency. But on the other side, we have the real exchange rate, which is the currency compared to the goods and prices, goods and services, products. So what happens is, let's say in this case, the German beer is twice as expensive as an American beer. So the real exchange rate is like 1/2 case of German beer per case of American beer. So as you can see, the prices, which is the nominal exchange rate, will role play differently when it comes to real exchange rate, because we are dealing with products. So the real exchange rate depends on the nominal exchange rate and the prices of goods in 2 different countries. So just knowing the nominal is not going to help us regarding the export and import. We got to know the relationship between the prices of the goods also, because it might be that, let's say you have appreciation over certain currency, but what happens is the real exchange rate has not changed. Means that that certain currency has just devalued their nominal value, but when it comes to buying the product, it doesn't buy you more of the same product if you give them $1. It's just a different nominal change. So these are really important. Same goods. When we do that, we are talking about the same goods. Let's say when we are talking about burger, like a burger in US and a burger in Japan. So the real exchange rate is the key determinant of how much a country exports and imports, as you can see. So real exchange rate, which is the nominal exchange rate, multiplied by domestic prices, divided by foreign price, is something that gives us a real exchange rate. And it is one of the determinants how a country can export or import. So nominal, which was just the value multiplied by the domestic price of the product that we are talking about, divided by the foreign price. The foreign price is actually the nominal exchange rate and the domestic price in your own country. So we call it the foreign price, is called real exchange rate. So foreign price, a good example would be, let's say you're talking about a burger in Japan and a burger in US. So you put the nominal exchange rate for Japan, multiplied by American price for a burger, divided by a Japanese price for a burger, it shows you the real exchange rate for the US. So a depreciation or fall in the US real exchange rate means that the US goods have become cheaper relative to foreign goods. And this encourages consumers both at home and abroad to buy more goods and fewer goods from the other countries. So in this sense, the depreciation, it actually helps you. So the real exchange rate when it's lower, it actually helps foreigners to buy your products and your locals to even buy more of your products, because you get an advantage. You have an advantage over other products or foreign products. Is there any questions so far? Any comments, any questions? So as a result, U.S. exports rise and U.S. imports fall, and both of these changes raise U.S. net exports and helps the GDP. Conversely, an appreciation in the U.S. real exchange rate means the U.S. goods have become more expensive compared to foreign goods, and so the U.S. net exports fall, and then so does the GDP. So now let's talk about some other concept called yeah, that's exactly true. So when you have appreciation of your exchange rate, that sort of hurts your GDP. I mean, it's of course to a certain extent. The purchasing power parity theory is the simplest and most widely accepted theory explaining the variation of currency exchange rates. So the basic logic of purchasing power parity is a theory of exchange rates whereby a unit of any given currency should be able to buy the same quantity of goods in all countries. So the purchasing power parity actually entails that a unit of any given currency should be able to buy the same quantity of goods in all countries. So by every unit of like whatever currency, whatever certain number of currency should buy you the same amount of goods. So according to the purchasing power parity theory, a unit of any given currency should be able to buy the same quantity of goods in all countries, as we discussed. So is based on principle called the law of one price. So economy is actually trying to establish or basically make this law of one price happen. According to the law of one price, a good must sell for the same price in all locations. So according to this law, no matter where you are, when you buy, let's say, a mouse pad, it should be the same price no matter where you buy it. I mean, in a perfect situation, it's the case. Yeah, exactly. So if the law of one price were not true, unexploited profit opportunities would exist. So the process of taking advantage of differences in prices in different markets is called arbitrage. So arbitrage happens when people are trying to take opportunities and use those opportunities of advantages of prices. So let's say when people from Europe come to the States, their euro is stronger, so they have some advantage in buying certain stuff. They can buy more than they could buy at home. So they're using this this rule of arbitrage. Or when U.S. people go to some certain countries, their currencies are stronger. They have like a better advantage over certain countries. They can buy more, so they can use that. So if arbitrage happens, eventually prices that differed in two markets would necessarily converge. So according to the theory of purchasing power parity, a currency must have the same purchasing power in all countries, and exchange rates move to ensure that. So basically, when you have the purchasing power theory sort of adjusts. So let's say if the US dollar doesn't buy the same amount of product in a different country, their exchange rate should change in a way that it adjusts that difference. So it sort of balances. It doesn't stay the way it is. So what basically we mean by implications of purchasing power? It's like if the purchasing power of dollars is always the same at home and abroad, then the exchange rate cannot change. So the nominal exchange rate between the currencies of two countries must reflect the different price levels in those countries. That's why you see the exchange rate changes every day, because they want to make sure the purchasing power parity is actually well taken care of, and it's like the price is the same everywhere. So when the central bank prints large quantities of money, the money loses its value both in terms of goods and services, and it can buy, and in terms of the amounts of other currencies it can buy. So when you see certain countries decide to print a lot of money, like what happens in some countries, it actually hurts them in both ways. And in terms of goods and services they can buy, and also in terms of amount of other currencies that they can buy. So it's sort of their currency actually depreciates, which is not a very good idea. So as you can see here, money prices nominal exchange rate during the German hyperinflation, as you can see. You see the exchange rate here at different years. You see the price level and money supply. So as the price level was going high, and then the money supply was added a lot, you see that the exchange rate has been going down and down and down. So that is something you should really consider, because understanding it really helps, because you see those countries, when a certain country or market is experiencing a problem, they basically introduce the price level, they increase the price level, and they add their money supply to take care of the problems they are experiencing. Okay, any questions so far? Okay, limitations of purchasing power parity. Many goods are not easily traded or shipped from one country to another. That is also a limitation. So certain limitations might add to the scenario of the purchasing power parity problem. So tradable goods are not always perfect substitutes when they are produced in different countries. So the quality of goods are not the same. So certain goods that are produced in certain countries are not necessarily great substitutes for the same goods produced in another country. So these are limitations. So to summarize, net exports are the value of domestic goods and services sold abroad minus the value of foreign goods and services sold domestically. We talked about it. Net capital outflow is the acquisition of foreign assets by domestic residents minus the acquisition of domestic assets by foreigners. Then an economy's net capital outflow always equals the net export. So an economy's savings can be used to either finance investment at home or buy assets abroad. And then the nominal exchange rate is the relative price of the currency of two countries. And the real exchange rate is the relative price of goods and services of two countries. Okay. And when the nominal exchange rate changes so that each dollar buys more foreign currency, the dollar is said to appreciate or strengthen. That's what happened with Afghan currency, as we're explaining it now. Or when the nominal exchange rate changes so that each dollar buys less foreign currency, the dollar is said to appreciate or weaken, or depreciate or weaken. So when the foreign currency appreciates, your local currency depreciates. So according to the theory of purchasing power parity, a unit of currency should buy the same quantity of goods in all countries. So the nominal exchange rate between the currencies of two countries should reflect the country's price level in those countries. Okay. So this is the end of the lecture. Are there any questions? Any comments? Any questions? Anybody has any questions for me? Okay, so let me give you a task. Okay, so my question to you is explain how courts my question to you is how real exchange rate and nominal exchange rate impact GDP. So I want you to explain how it works, like how the real exchange rate and nominal exchange rate impact GDP. So that is a question. Just give you a few minutes to discuss that and give me the answer. Okay, take a few minutes and get back to me. Okay, so my question was how real exchange rate and nominal exchange rate impacted GDP. So we have the real exchange rate, that is nominal exchange rate multiplied by domestic price divided by foreign price. Okay, that's true. But how does it influence and impact GDP? It depends. You got to tell me when there is an increase in real exchange rate, what happens. When there's a decrease in real exchange rate. So it depends how it sort of works. So I want you to tell me how it changes. If there is an increase in real exchange rate, what happens? If there is a decrease in real exchange rate, what happens? So when it's going to be positive, when it's going to be negative. So going back to here, so basically, to answer the question, when you have a higher real exchange rate, it sort of discourages people to to buy your product, so to import from your country. So let's say you have a high real exchange rate, that means your prices for the same goods are higher, so that discourages other countries to buy from you. That means that hurts your export or reduces their import from you. So your net exports, which is your exports minus imports, will go down, so your GDP will go down. But if your real exchange rate is lower, so it means that the products or goods are less expensive in your country, so countries can come and buy from you, so they import from you, so your exports will go higher, so your net exports will go higher, so your GDP will go higher. So that's how you could analyze it. So as you can see, these are all related to each other. And the beauty of it is they work like in a way that they all have influence on each other. So understanding all these concepts are really helpful in the sense that it helps us to maximize our economic benefits. So either internationally or locally. Okay, so are there any questions before we end the session? Okay, if there are no questions, I also want to highlight that it's going to be the same for this course. The next session, I'm going to discuss an individual assignment for you guys that I expected in 3 weeks. It's going to be due in 3 weeks from the time I give it to you. And also, I'll also tell you about our final exam, because you're going to have a final exam for economics. You will all log in and get the questions, and you have an hour and a half to answer those. You can use your resources. It's an open book test, but you have to submit in 1 hour and a half. Then that plus your individual project plus your class participation will basically conclude your final score for this course. Are there any questions or comments? Yes, it will be one time. They devise a time for your exam. Everybody should log in that certain time. And the time you log in, you'll have an hour and a half to take your test. Probably they'll do it in a day, so anytime during that certain day of the exam, I'll double check with the admin how they're going to administer it and get back to you. Okay, very good. So if there's no questions or comments, that would be end of this class. Thank you so much. You have a nice week, and see you next week.